Hey everybody, Rudy here from the Home Improvement Channel with another video showing you how to fix things around the house. In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace this front entry door. This is an easy project that you can tackle yourself and save yourself some money. But there are a few things that you need to consider before getting started on a project like this. First thing is make sure you have the correct door on site before you start this job. Obviously, there's going to be a big gaping hole in front of your house that you're not going to want to leave open all night. One of the things that you need to make sure to get the correct door is make sure it's the right size. You're going to want to measure the width. Most entry doors are 36 inches wide, basically, and the height, most of them are 80 inches tall. That's the door itself. The frame is going to be a little bit different. If you have a 36 by 80 door, that is the most common size from what I have found. The other thing is make sure you have the right in-swing. The way that you can tell easily is if you put your back against the door on the inside of the house. If the hinges are on your right, you have a right in-swing. If the hinges are on your left, you have a left in-swing. The other thing to make sure is do you have 2x4 walls? As you can see on this sticker, this door is made for a 4 and 9/16 inch jamb. That's a 2x4 wall. If you happen to have a 2x6 wall, they do make a jamb extender kit that you can use to add the width of the jamb to make up for the 2x6, the difference between that and a 2x4. And it also extends the threshold at the bottom so that it doesn't look real funny right there. Alright, so those are the main things that you need to consider. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to cut the caulk up against the siding around the door. If you have a house with vinyl siding, you'll probably have a J-channel right next to the brick mold, so this razor knife will work very well for that. This house has cedar siding, so the caulk was a lot thicker, so I'm using my oscillating tool here to get that cut. Just do that around all three sides and remove the brick mold, but we're going to show that here in just a minute. If you have a storm door, you're going to want to get that out of the way first, just to get this ball rolling here. Just take all the screws out of that puppy and get it out of the way and set it aside. If you want to reuse it, just save all the parts for later. And once you get the storm door out of the way, you can go ahead and cut the inside caulk around the brick mold just to make it a little bit easier to pry that thing out of there. So once you get all the caulk cut, just take your pry bar and hammer it in there and start prying it loose. Don't worry too much about damaging the brick mold, because chances are your new door is going to come with new brick mold anyway. If that brick mold is in good shape, you can save it for a later project. Just work it around the whole thing, get all three pieces of brick mold off, and get rid of them. And you're going to want to do the same thing to the inside of the house around the casing. That paint line where the casing meets the drywall is especially important that you cut that, because if you don't, you're going to rip the paper from the drywall and have a bigger mess than you know what to do with. So make sure you cut that side real good. And then once you do that, just go to the inside and cut that one too. And usually, to get this started, I usually take a thin tool like a painter's 5-in-1 and hammer it in there just like I'm doing right there and get it started. That way you can switch over to your bigger pry bar and go ahead and pull it the rest of the way off of there. While you're doing that, make sure you keep an eye on that paint line around the outside so that you don't wind up doing what I said earlier. Just slowly work it loose and do this on all three pieces of casing. So once you get the casing off, you're going to want to get the door off of the frame. One way to do this is to put a punch in through the bottom and tap out the pins like that. And then you can do that and to get the door out of the way. Or if you just want to save yourself a step, go ahead and pull the screws out of the hinges that go into the frame. Because more than likely you're going to have a long screw in each hinge that's going to go through to the house framing. And if you don't get that out of the way, you're going to wind up cutting through it with your Sawzall, which you can do, but it's just going to make it harder to do that. So I always take these screws out before I do that. That way I don't have to deal with that. Okay. Once you get the hinges off, you go ahead and go to the other side and take all your deadbolt screws out. Chances are those are going to be some longer screws that go through to the house framing as well. And you can cut those with a sawzall, but it's just a pain in the neck. Once you get all the screws out of the way, just take your pry bar and kind of pull the door frame away from the house frame to make more of a gap there for your sawzall. And once you get that gap there, just take your sawzall and start cutting. One thing that you want to keep a note of is, do you have a doorbell that comes through your brick mold? If you have a wire there, make sure you don't cut that wire with your sawzall, or it's just going to be a whole lot of sadness. This house had the wire coming through the siding, so it was outside of the brick mold, but I have seen houses that do have the doorbell in the brick mold, and you're going to have to be conscious of where that wire's at so you don't wind up cutting it. And just go ahead and cut the remaining nails once you get all the screws out, and do that usually on the left and the right side. It's unusual to find screws or nails in the top, although you might find that in some cases. Do the same thing on the other side. Make yourself a little gap there first, and just go ahead and slice that puppy out of there. Once you get everything cut, take a hammer and just kind of tap it to get it started, and then you should be able to wiggle it out from this point on by hand, or you can just keep hammering. But either way, it'll come out of there just easy enough. And get that thing out of there. Say goodbye. There goes the old door. And by the way, this is that big gaping hole that I was referring to at the beginning of the video that you're going to want to close up. Once you get everything out of the way, go through and either punch in the nails that are existing, or use a nail pulling tool to pull the remaining nails out of there to make way for the new door. Now this is what I did on the bottom. Here's a picture of the tape that I used, and I used a piece of metal flashing there, as you can see. So just kind of do this, and I also added some silicone for the new door to sit on, and I would recommend doing that too to try to keep that water out of there. Alright, so it's ready to accept now. One thing that you're going to want to do is take the plug out of the door that's usually going through the lock hole right there, and go through and look for any remaining staples or anything that may be going through to the door, because you're going to want to make sure that that door opens before you put it into the house hole, because once you get it in there and you find out it doesn't open, you'll have to pull it back out again. See, there we go. We're opening fine. It's ready to go in. So just carefully put it in there, and you're going to have to play around with it. Once you get it installed, you're going to need to shim that, and I'll talk about that more here in just a minute. So I just need to caulk around the outside where the house siding is, right here, and then I'll also caulk around the inside. I'm going to put the storm door back, but I still want to caulk that to keep any cold air from coming through there. And then, of course, I need to put the trim back on the inside and caulk all that too, and paint it and do all that. And here's the view from the inside. You can stuff insulation in here, but I usually like to use the spray foam. I use the one that comes out of the blue can. So it's made for doors and windows so that it doesn't expand so much and wind up bowing the door frame. And I just spray this stuff all the way around. It does a good job of keeping out the cold air. And you're also, like I was saying earlier, you're going to want to shim the door before you screw everything down, and make sure that your gap that goes around the door is even all the way around, because it just looks terrible when you have a small gap at the top and a big gap at the bottom, and vice versa. So I can't explain that. Each one is going to be different, but shim it and then nail it appropriately. Also, here's another thing that I like to do is when I'm nailing it, I put the nails they'll wind up behind the weather stripping right there, so you don't have a bunch of nail holes that you have to patch right there where you can see them. So that just looks a lot better. When you do your lock set, you the best way to do this, if you're using the old one, is to put the top of the lock part into the hole right there. That way you can see where the bottom screw is going to go, and just make sure that it's straight, and take a measurement where that screw is going to go from the end of the door. That way it doesn't wind up all crooked on you, because that's just not going to look good. And of course the spray foam, once you spray it in there and it dries, it's going to be oozing out of the sides right there like it is. Just take a 5-in-1 tool or a oscillating tool or something like that and cut it off flush with the drywall. Now you might be wondering, each door that you get usually has one screw missing. There should be a bag that comes with the door that's going to have some longer screws in it. These are the screws that go in those missing holes, and they screwed back to the framing. Also, these little wedges, they go in the corners right here, and usually I put the skinny end in towards the house, and the fat end goes underneath the weather stripping right there. That way, when you close the door, it's not catching on that. Okay, so that's where those little wedges go, in case you're wondering, because it usually comes with that. And here's the inside view of the finished product, and there's the outside view of the finished product. Alright guys, that's about it. That's how I install a front door. Just a couple of tips before you paint it. I would take the weather stripping off. I would take any lock hardware off if you had installed that. Probably you didn't if you just installed a new door, but if you did, I would take all that off. It just makes it a lot easier to paint. I've been to people's houses where the weather stripping is just all full of paint, and it just doesn't look good. Total installation time is probably 3 or 4 hours. That includes the time to take the old door out, prepare the hole to accept the new door, to do whatever you need to do on the bottom for the flashing or the, you saw what I did earlier. All that kind of stuff factors in, and that doesn't include caulking and painting. That's another project by itself. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, click on that thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I come out with videos like this as often as I can. Thanks for watching.